everyone. Welcome back to another episode of You Were Meant for More. I can't even do my You Were Meant for More because of this microphone right here. I am so excited you're joining for our first in-person interview. It's so exciting. I'm just, yeah, you should have seen me all giddy earlier. But I am grateful to have an amazing guest speaker here with me today. We are going to be talking all about overcoming obstacles and embracing dreams in entrepreneurship. So I am grateful that he is here with us, and I'm going to introduce him in just a minute. But first, I want to share a little bit about who he is and what he does, because you got to listen to this. Amazing. So after graduating with a BS degree in business administration with an emphasis in accounting from CSULA, Cal State LA, yes. In 95, Tony went to work as an auditor for the Bureau of State Audit. As an auditor, I'm like, oh my goodness, I lost my place. Let me just put my glasses on. Seriously, people? Like, just say you're old without saying you're old. Just put your glasses on. I kid you not. As an auditor, he was in charge of financial performance and compliance audits. In 2005, Tony established One Tax Pro Inc., a tax firm that specializes in personal and business taxation, corporate compliance information, accounting, payroll, and tax resolutions. He has 29 years of experience providing tax and accounting services to small businesses. One Tax Pro currently services business clients in 42 states and 11 countries. His off-the-job interests include motivational speaking to troubled youth. I love that. Mentor to young business professionals like myself, young business professionals. I love that. Love that you're like helping, fellow business owners. And working in the community with Covina Rotary. So thank you, Tony, so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, Francine. Thank you so much.
Good. I'm so glad. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm excited because obviously you were my first guest of 2025. And you and I had talked earlier this year about really focusing on the fundamentals of faith, fitness, and finance, right? It kind of all came together because I was telling Tony earlier, I was really focused on where I was headed with the business, and I knew that I needed that foundation of finances. And so, of course, who better to bring in than Tony Nevarez here and setting that groundwork for what is to come in 2025 and how to get you to your next level in finances, because you absolutely love that topic, don't you?
Mm-hmm. I've been doing it for many years, so I love it.
Yes. They don't know yet, and he probably doesn't even know, but we're going to be doing something together to really focus on building that confidence in finance for people. More to come on that, right?
I'm ready.
All right. See, I love that attitude, people. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. I really want to talk to you about getting to know who you are. I want the audience to know where you started, early life. How did you come to be who you are today? So share with the audience all about how you got started, early life. Let's go, Tony.
I have an interesting story.
Of course you do. By the way, I know. That's why I'm so excited for him to share, so go for it.
So I was born in Lincoln Heights.
Okay.
My parents are from Mexico.
Okay.
And I would say that my parents never graduated from elementary school, both of them. So it was an interesting childhood. I was poor. At the age of 8, I was selling oranges outside of the freeways, Bank of America and other banks. Then after that, I sold items in parks just because we needed to survive. I mean, we were really low income. So in my household, it was always about poverty, not having enough. Life is difficult. Life is challenging. Only bad people are rich. That's bad, but being poor was good, I guess. So I remember all the struggles. It was challenging. I didn't have a bed till I was like 17 years old. I slept on the floor. So it was interesting. I come from a family, very humble, amazing parents, amazing community, and I wouldn't give that up. I mean, for anything. It was difficult, challenging. After that, then we worked in the swap meet until I graduated from college, actually. I worked in the swap meet. I was horrible at selling. I was horrible at talking with people, but we had to pay bills. And I was the go-to person for my dad to help with the additional income that was needed just to pay rent. I mean, imagine being a child and there's no Santa Claus, there's no vacations, there's no, we just recently went out and had, sushi and steak, and none of that existed when I was a kid. So it was pretty interesting. It was pretty challenging, but that laid the foundation to who I am now. And I know that you're taking this in steps, so baby steps. So we're gonna go with that was my childhood. Those were my upbringings, my parents. In that, there was some limiting beliefs that became who I was, who I thought I was, and that's when the challenges came afterwards. When I graduated from college and I worked as an auditor, and then we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yes. So I have to point out what you just said. Rich people are bad.
Yeah.
And I think it's so profound that you said that, because the thing is, recently I've been talking a lot on the show about having those money blocks. My verbiage growing up was money doesn't grow on trees. We don't have enough. Rich people are greedy type of mentality. And it's like, it's crazy because you don't even realize we're being, imprinted on with these types of beliefs from our families. And again, we do come from humble beginnings and whatnot, but it's really understanding where those money stories come from and what we believe and how people stay stuck in a sense of where they're at because they believe they can't go any further. Like today, for example, I had somebody reach out to me and literally say, I'm so glad you reminded me of this. And it was a post I shared that said, it is okay to dream big.
Yes. And actually, when I was growing up, I wasn't prepared to dream big. As a matter of fact, it wasn't even part of our household. Right. We just wanted to survive. And the money part, I think, is my dad always and my mom had jobs where they were taken advantage of by people that were making more money. So in their mind, it's like, well, people that have money because they had to screw someone over.
Right.
And to have that success.
Right.
So when I was growing up, I had these limited beliefs that money isn't for me because it's not part of our DNA, it's not part of our people, it's not part of our family, so it's never going to happen to us.
Right.
And then you grow up thinking that, and you have to go through all this process just to get that out of your mind.
Yes.
And it is challenging, but once you get it out of your mind and you realize that you deserve it, you can do it, everything changes.
Yes. And I'm so happy that you said that because again, it's not only coming from me, but it's coming from you understanding that your foundation showed you a certain path, but you knew to switch that path and go for something bigger. And, we talk about the possibilities that are out there once you allow yourself to dream and to understand, like I mentioned, the money stories. And so thank you for sharing that. I know we love our family. We come from humble beginnings. It's just, we don't know what we don't know. And our parents didn't know what they didn't know. Yeah. It's really awesome that we get to kind of be that light or that hope for people to say, hey, it's okay to ask for more.
But it was normal. When I was growing up, I live in Lincoln Heights. It was not a high income area.
Right.
Everyone around me was at my same level, so it was normal.
Yes.
It was okay. Mm-hmm. I've never visited a steakhouse when I was a kid. I didn't know what a nice fancy place was or nice vacations. So everything was normal. Some kids never got Christmas presents. I didn't get Christmas presents. So it was normal. We accept it as our truth, as a reality, and we become comfortable. Once we get out of that city, move to Sacramento was an arch, so then you have a different community. You're like, wait, that wasn't normal. Like, I was poor. I was like, you realize you're poor until you get out of that situation. And I'm like, wait, there's steakhouses?
Yes.
There's wine? There's I remember when I went to my first fancy restaurant, it was Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Mm-hmm. It was in San Diego. And they asked me, how did you like your steak? And I'm like, not alive and really well done. Well done. And I had no idea what I was doing. But then that's when I realized, I'm like, wow, we were really poor. Mm-hmm. And I realized, first, I realized there wasn't a Santa, but then I realized, well, Santa gives it to everyone. But why did I get a gift? And my parents' excuse was, because we lived in an apartment, it was like, well, there's no chimney here, so sorry, but he didn't come this year. So I'm like, can we move next year? I need a house with a chimney. So yeah, but it was ingrained. It was part of our lifestyle. We were happy. Yeah. Actually, I would have to say that I was happier as a child than my own kids because they grew up with having everything they wanted, so
Everything.
they don't really, kick the can and, hustle and,
Yeah.
work closely with your dad because you were trying to survive. I mean, our kids don't understand that yet. So it's their mentality is a lot more different
Right.
than when we grew up. But I think that's what made us stronger. That's what made us goal oriented and say we were meant for more.
Yes.
We have to go. And so what made me make that transition
Yes.
from accepting the fact that that was my life, I was meant to be poor.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I remember when we met last time, you asked me, well, what happened that made you say enough?
Enough. Yeah.
And so several things happened. When I was a kid,
By the way, people, I love his story, so listen up.
so when I was a kid, I'm going to date myself. It was back in the day, it was Le Tigre, polo shirts. It was Nikes and Pumas and
He
Reeboks.
said the tigre.
It was back, it was a long time ago, right? So, I mean, when you're in junior high, you want to look good. And I remember a story, Cynthia Beltran. I still remember her name.
Oh.
So I was, selling oranges in the street. I was poor. My dad had no money. My mom had no money.
Okay.
So there was this beautiful little girl. Her name is Cynthia Beltran.
Okay.
I remember she had a big scar on her face, but to me, she was gorgeous. I was shy. When you're broke, when you don't have money and you live off of people donating to you, like Goodwill or secondhand stuff. So I was a mess. Like I had no Nike, no Pumas. I remember Kmart had Tracks. I had Tracks on. Those were my fancy shoes.
I remember Montgomery Ward's had bike.
So I had
It
Tracks.
wasn't Nike, it was bike.
So I remember it had like a little, almost like a little whale, which in my mind, it was the swoosh from the Nike. So I felt like I could
Got
fly
it.
with
There
those
you go.
shoes. So I remember they were showing the movie Tron. And
Oh, yes.
back in the days, you would pay like, I don't know, it was 25 cents. And you could go watch the movie, and the whole week you could watch the movie, right? So you paid 25 cents. I don't know how. I was very shy. I had low self-esteem. I couldn't talk to anyone. But after weeks of debating and fighting with myself, I asked Cynthia Beltran to watch the movie Tron. It was Tron back in the
Yes.
days. To watch the movie. And what did she say? Yes. I was happy, but then guess what was my second thought?
How am I going to pay
How
for
am I going to
this?
pay for this? So then I go to my dad because, I wasn't working. I was in junior high.
Yeah.
I mean, my kids work actually, but I wasn't working. And then I said, hey, Dad, can I have $1? $1.
$1. Oh, my goodness.
$1.
Right.
And his answer was, I don't have $1. So then I avoided Cynthia Beltran for the rest of my junior high. And I remember being so pissed that I said, I will never be poor. And that was the first thing that, also knowing that there was a Santa supposedly and that never visited me, that was another thing that sort of shocked me. But anyways, so that was like the beginning of me saying enough is enough. So that was like part one. The second part was realizing when you step out of poverty into a city where there's actually people with money, you realize, God, I'm broke.
Yeah.
And then that's when you say, I don't want that lifestyle I didn't have kids, but for me and for my future kids. So then you start realizing like, there is more out there. What makes me not special enough to have that? Remember when you have poverty, you have low self-esteem. You don't believe you deserve it. You don't believe that God favors you in that way.
Right.
So then in your mind, you're still thinking money is bad, and you're still thinking like it's not for me. So that was the second thing. I've never known any man that works more than my dad. And my dad said something that just crushed me. And to this day, I still carry it with me. He said, if you don't become better than me, I failed you as a father. Now, this was a long time ago. So you add Cynthia Beltran, you add my dad's words that if you're not better than me, I failed you as a father. And my dad saying, no matter what you do, you want to be self-employed because that's where the success is.
Yeah.
And when you're a kid, you never listen to your parents. I graduated from college with an accounting degree, emphasis in taxation, and then I went to go work for someone for 7 years as an auditor. So then in your mind, I'm like, I'm content. I'm making a little bit of money, a lot more than what I ever imagined I was making. And then the second part of my destruction came where I finally started having money. And then this is where I was talking to you about money issues. I started spending all of it.
Oh, yes.
And I know that's a different show, but yeah, that was horrible because once you start having money and you don't have the personal development to be able to handle an excess of money. Remember, excess of money,
Right.
I was not being able to have $1. I remember the first year I was getting paid like $36,000. This was many years ago. And after that, I was making, I don't know, 40 and then 60 and 80 and something like that. But I started having money, and then I started just spending it and having nothing.
Yeah.
But anyways, so what made me make the transition to say, I'm going to start my business?
Yeah.
Because that's when my dad's words, I was having some issue with one of the managers where I was working. And I remember getting a bad review. And I knew that getting a bad review was going to limit my success in that organization. Because I knew once you get a bad review, you're done. So then I'm like, shoot, I have a bad review. My dad, be self-employed. And everyone is like, don't do it. That's not smart. Why are you going to leave a good job with all these benefits to start your own business? That makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
And I was telling all my coworkers, I'm going to quit next year. Next year comes around, I'm going to quit next year. Next year comes around, I'm going to quit next year. And I never quit until I finally had one of my coworkers who was she was tough. She was a tough cookie. I mean, this woman was like straight up just tough in your face. She goes, Navarez, you've always said you were going to quit, but you don't have the kahunas to quit. I'll bet you $1 that you're not going to quit this Christmas. So then the bad review, all that my dad said, Cynthia Beltran, selling oranges in the streets, working in the swap meets for a number of years, it all happened at the same time. All my emotions, my just pissed at myself for just not letting fear take over me. And I remember writing the letter of giving my 2-week notice, and I couldn't turn it in. And then right before Christmas, so I wouldn't lose that $1, I turned in my resignation, started my business, and then everything took off.
The rest
after
is
that.
history,
Yeah.
people. The rest is history. And Cynthia Beltran, it wasn't you, it was him.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't you,
He
honey.
was too broke.
He was too broke.
Now I hear no money, no honey.
No
They're
money,
right.
no honey, no nothing. You would have just hung out in front of the movie theater.
25 cents.
25, that's nuts.
And imagine that experience was part of my decision to just break free from that poor man's mentality that I'm not good enough, that I'm not smart enough, that I can't succeed, that it's not in my DNA. And you get to a point where, I mean, not only I was overweight, in debt, I had 10 credit cards, they were all maxed.
Yeah.
I had no money, and my parents thought, wow, my son graduated from college, he has a good paying job, he must be doing well. He drives a sports cars, dresses nice, and I was broke. And all that was like, I was at the bottom. How much more down can I go?
Right.
And I said, I'm just going to do it. And then that bet, I'm a Leo.
For $1.
We don't like to lose. I'm very competitive. Leos are just that way.
Oh,
so I'm
you're
like,
so on
and
for
actually,
$1.
I got the $1 and I framed it.
Did
Because
you? I
that
love
was
that.
the $1 that helped me make a lot more dollars.
There you go. That's what it does. I love that you talked about like that poor mentality and where that came about as far as you had that realization like, shit, I'm poor. Oops, sorry. So funny because not too long ago, I told my mom back in college when we went over the whole socioeconomics of like where you stand in the different classes growing up. It's low class, middle class, upper class, or high class. And I go, considering all of it, I go, we were low class. And she's like, no, we weren't. And I said, yes, we were. My mom was a single mom. My dad, was in the military at the time. So it was just us. We didn't have a lot of money, and hence the money doesn't grow on trees.
Oh, yeah.
We can't afford that. So funny that she's just like, we weren't low class. Like, she didn't think so. But it's like, where it all fell under, like we didn't have a house, we were living in an apartment.
Same here.
We didn't, the chimney thing.
Yeah.
I thought that was so cute. I'm like, which is really
So now
sad.
every house I have has
Yeah,
a
it
chimney.
has a chimney. I'm sure. Like we actually love chimneys, so like we always have a house that has a chimney.
I would
Anyways,
not buy a house that doesn't have a
right,
chimney.
right. I mean, it literally scarred him. But no, that's amazing. But I just love your stories because again, it all comes from foundations of like how we were raised, what we thought to believe was true. So now you're in business for yourself, right?
Oh yeah, that's another story.
So
Oh God.
I want you to share how that came about.
The dollar propelled me to make that decision
Yes.
to just quit. I remember I was living in Sacramento. I was like, I need to go back home because family is everything. I was alone. It was lonely over
Yeah.
there in Sacramento, so I needed my family. I was already older. I moved into my parents' house in the spare bedroom that they had. And they had a garage, and I converted that into an office. I remember the first year that I started my business, I made $200.
I love it. I think I was negative my first year, so okay.
At least I wasn't negative.
I was negative.
I made $200, and I'm like, what the hell did I just do? And what happens is the people that you need the support from when you're vulnerable, when you're afraid, when you put everything in the line is your friends and family. And unfortunately, for me, I didn't have the support. I didn't have the encouragements. I didn't have anyone who actually believed in me. My parents did, somewhat, but parents always want their best for their kids. And in their mind is like, my son graduated from college. He has a good job, paid vacations, paid holidays. He has an easy job because I love being an auditor. I love that job. Why would you leave? And my dad said, I want you to be better than me, not be the same as me. But he was like, son, are you sure you want to do that? I mean, you're leaving everything you studied and worked so hard for to start with nothing. And I don't know where I got that courage from, that anger, the need to just do something different. But once I did it, and I sat in that, I remember I went to IKEA because it was the cheapest place to go and bought all the furniture I needed.
Love IKEA.
And I got a computer and a cheap printer because I couldn't afford anything. And then I'm like, I'm in business, $200. And then I'm like, why did I do this? Second year,
Okay.
$800. And I'm like, this is horrible. Like, there's no way in hell I'm going to make this happen. And then instead of having the support from your family, your friends, they discourage you. They're like, you really messed up. Like, that was a dumb decision.
Yes.
And then they start telling you what you're not good at.
Oh,
and
my
then they start
goodness,
telling me,
yes.
your Spanish is not that good. Even though you're Mexican, you should be embarrassed of yourself. I was like, because I had to do presentations in Spanish, and they were horrible. And they were saying, you don't have the personality to be self-employed. You don't have the confidence. You don't have, like, they named everything I didn't have. And guess what? You hear it so much that you start believing it.
Yes.
And I started thinking, well, maybe it is a mistake. But what made me determined to make it work, let me backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
So when I was in Sacramento, and I remember I was talking to God because I was desperate, and I'm one of those that was talking to God. Now it's different, but I was talking to God only when I needed him.
Yeah.
I said, okay, God.
Don't we always do that?
Yeah. I was doing that when I needed him only, and then after that, it was
We
like,
start
hey,
to
God.
realize. I think I did that too in the beginning. So yeah.
So I had already, in my mind, made the decision to quit and open my own tax practice. I remember I was doubting myself, everyone that I talked to, because before quitting, you want to get everyone's advice, and everyone's just as afraid and insecure as you are, which is sort of bad news, because then they're all going to tell you all the negative stuff that could happen instead of all the blessings, right?
Yes.
So then I said, you know what, forget them. They're all negative. I need someone who's going to help me. So then I turned to God, right? And I said, okay, God. I started compromising with God. I said, all right, God, so I'm going to apply as an auditor in the city of Los Angeles. If I do not get that position, that means you're telling me to open my own business. So I did apply. I had an interview, and they didn't hire me. So I said, okay, I'm moving. 2 week notice, I'm out. And I did. I moved. I knew that with God's help, there was no way I could fail. I did fail because I was not making money. I was broke. I was like, at least I was without credit cards anymore, no credit card debt. When I moved, I paid off everything. And I was like, I still have nothing. So then it was like, what do I do now? So how do you go from making a decision to becoming successful at your own business? So then I knew that I didn't have the confidence. I knew that I wasn't good at public speaking. I knew that my Spanish was sort of weak. I knew that I wasn't a great tax person. I knew that I had a lot of shortcomings. I didn't know about money, finance. I didn't know how to do really complicated tax returns. So then I said, okay, so what skills do I need? So I started evaluating myself into my strengths and my weaknesses. And I went at it with my weaknesses. I started studying every day. I started personal development project on me. Because I knew that once I had the information, the knowledge, I was going to have the confidence. And with the confidence, you start attracting. It's a natural way to attract when you have the confidence. Because when you're broke and when you are in need, you sell in a way that you sound and you feel desperate. And when that happens, people feel it. And then for some reason, they don't hire you.
Right.
And that's what was happening with me. I was desperate. I mean, I was like, I did not quit to be broke. So then I started dedicating my whole life to just educate myself in every area. I got tons of books, and I was reading every single day, IRS publications. I did some seminars. I did everything I needed to build up my confidence, my knowledge, so I could ask the right questions, so I could be a better public speaker. So I did all that for a long time.
Yes.
Eventually, with being committed to my personal development, committed to being a good tax accountant, committed to having a focus on a certain area, which was I was focusing on the Hispanic market and working with business owners. I would probably say now 98 or 99% of my clients are business owners. And of that, I would say 95% of them are Hispanic. So that was what I was going to be focusing in. And I wasn't speaking Spanish very well. So I said, okay, I have to learn how to do public speaking, learn how to close. And I started reading a ton of books. With reading all those books and having the knowledge and knowing what I didn't know,
Yeah.
I started speaking with more confidence. I started having more eye contact. I started dressing better because I lost weight because, when you're broke, you tend to eat the wrong foods, right? So I started, exercising. I started sharing my stories, how I started. And that confidence, which was based on the personal development, on learning what I was even talking about, because at first I was saying I'm great, but no one believed it. I started attracting one client at a time, one client at a time. And then next thing you know, I started creating a lot of goals. And I think that's what kept me moving.
Yes.
Because the knowledge and knowing how to talk to people, knowing how to express yourself, knowing how to read people. I mean, I took all kinds of courses, but that only takes you so far. And it gave me the confidence, but I'm saying, how am I going to continue to grow? So then what I ended up doing, I remember The Power of Focus, best book I ever read on establishing goals and knowing how to manage them. So then my next step was, okay, so how am I going to proceed? And I knew that money was a big issue for me. So then I read, I think it was called Investing for Dummies. That was my second book that I read that I needed to learn about finances. Even though I was an accountant,
Yes.
I was horrible at managing my own money.
Right.
So then I had to deal with the fear of failing. That was huge. As I dealt with all that, my confidence went up. Then I said, okay, I have to start establishing goals. And I used the power of focus to establish goals both for my personal life, for my education, money, and in terms of creating a percentage of growth for my business income. That kept me going. I reached those goals, and then I set newer goals, and I set newer goals. So I'm not the type of person that creates annual goals like everyone. A lot of people,
Right.
December is their year, or January, they're going to create all their yearly goals. I started creating daily goals, weekly goals, monthly goals, quarterly goals, yearly goals, and that just kept me going. So once I reached those goals, I'm like, okay, it's time to celebrate.
Yes.
And then immediately, I created my next set of goals. And I've been doing that for 20 some years.
Wow.
And it took my business, in my mind, I'm like, I want to have a firm that works in other countries and works in other states, not just where I operate.
Right.
That was my goal that I had initially. I had to do something with international, like having international clients.
Okay.
To this day, we have clients in different countries, different states, and everything that I thought I wasn't going to be able to accomplish, now 29 years later, starting making $200. It's a very successful tax firm.
Yes.
We have a number of staff. Everything changed after that. But it was a struggle, and the biggest struggle is right here.
Oh, he nailed
Working
it.
with your mind.
He nailed it, people. He nailed it. Go.
That, to be honest with you, is the biggest obstacle for me, was working with this, because you have to develop an attitude like you do deserve it. God will bless you. And I'm a strong believer in the law of attraction. Strong believer. The Secret.
The Secret, yes.
I love that.
Right.
The book and the DVD. I watched that like 20 times, 30 times.
Manifestation, all of that. And it, you know, it's so funny because it's rooted in prayer. You know what I mean? Like you're basically asking. You're asking for prayer, and you're putting that towards manifestation of what it is that
Even though it says the universe, I mean, for me, it's God.
It's God.
Yeah,
Yes,
for me,
that's
it's
what
God.
I'm saying. Like a lot of people say the universe, and yeah, to me, it's God as well. But you highlighted 2 points I want to circle back to that I really want to emphasize. And it's so funny that we're having this conversation. And so literally, Tony and I are just like, we're like this. We think alike. And I love that he shared with me not too long ago that when I was going through my own business struggles, he's like, I did exactly what you did. The struggles I went through, he went through. And so just really understanding that one business owner to another is so profound to me. But what I wanted to share is how you talked about you only had family who was there to support you, and they were not your biggest supporters.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, like, I know I've talked about this on the show before, but it's like your family, your friends, they are not going to be your biggest supporters. Your family wants the best for you, which they will then tell you to stop what you're doing and go get a job, basically. And I had that so many times on me. So yeah, I get that.
So here's an interesting fact. 29 years as an accountant, and I'm a good accountant.
No,
I'm really good.
No, I'm sorry. He's not a good accountant.
I have to brag a little.
He is a great accountant.
I am a great accountant.
Yes.
I'm trying to be humble here.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a good
Okay,
accountant.
I'm going to humble you even bigger. He's a great accountant, and we're going to be talking about your business in a bit.
So here's an interesting fact.
Go ahead.
I have a huge family.
Okay.
I have 2 of my family members that are clients.
Okay.
2.
Okay.
One is my parents, because I do them to them for free. If not, they probably wouldn't even hire me.
They kind of gave you their garage.
Yeah, I know.
So.
My parents are my first clients.
Okay.
And the second one is a cousin who got in trouble with the government, and I had to pull her out. So she now has faith in my services. But the majority of them, it's interesting when you hear, I don't want to make them more rich. It's like, seriously?
Yeah.
Like,
it's
what?
a mentality, though.
Yeah.
Remember,
so they will
there's-
not hire me.
yeah.
They will not hire me. And
Right.
I'm okay with it, but it's sort of, in your heart, it's like, God, that sucks.
But see, they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to personal develop, you're not willing to educate yourself, you're not
Yeah.
willing to go after more, they will stay in that space.
Because they call it luck.
Yeah.
He's lucky.
No,
Yeah, I
you
was
worked
like,
hard.
no.
You worked hard for all of that.
Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to recircle back was when you said you left with nothing. You quit. You're just like, I'm leaving. I just want to share, like, a lot of people do that. I quit with 1 paycheck. And I haven't looked back, and I'm going on year 7.
Yeah.
So you really have to have, like you said, faith. If you've noticed, a lot of what Tony said structured around faith, fitness, and finance.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that that's, your key points and where you're coming to. I wanted to jump into overcoming your beliefs. And I know that we kind of touched in this area. Were there days where you were just like, and I'm curious, that you felt like you wanted to quit?
Absolutely were there days. Yes.
I had to ask 'cause,
many,
man.
many times that happened. Especially at the beginning. The
Yes.
first 2 years of any business is challenging.
Oh, my goodness.
It is tough. And most businesses have a loss.
Yes.
I've never had a loss, thank God, but it's been a $200 gain. Yeah, you can't do much.
Yeah.
Yes, there was times. And I think it was towards the beginning because you start questioning your decisions. You start questioning, am I doing the right thing? And then sometimes, you go to God, and then, clients stop paying you. You get more into debt because you invested in the business. And then you get an employee, and you're like, how am I going to pay him now? I'm living with my parents. Like, I better get a job. This is embarrassing. Like, I can't even date. Like, I was thinking, I can't even date. I'm like, where do you live? With my parents. Where's your business? In the garage of my parents? Imagine. So in my mind, I'm like, God, that's so embarrassing. And I'm like, you know what? You know what is interesting? I was sort of, in my mind, I was going back when I was a little kid and I was poor. And I was thinking, I'm heading there. I actually had a job. I had health care. I have to pay my own Kaiser insurance now. I have no health benefits, no vision, no dental, no nothing, no life insurance. I had nothing. I started with nothing. For me, it was a big accomplishment because if you recall earlier, I said I had 10 credit cards. I was maxed out. I was broke.
Right.
And I made it a point to pay everything before I left work and moved to Los Angeles. And I said, I have to go there with no debt, no money. And I set crazy goals. So I say something in Spanish, and I'm going to say it in Spanish, which is something that I've said for many years, is siempre sueña en grande, porque lo peor que puede pasar es que casi llegues a tu meta. Nunca sueñes en chico, porque lo peor que puede pasar es que llegues a tu meta. So what that means is
translate. Let's
always dream big, because the worst that could happen is you could almost reach your goal. So for example, for me, my goal was to buy a first home that is X amount of dollars. That was like a big dream. I remember it was like $600,000. Once again, I was making $200. Okay. So it was a crazy, always dream big, because the worst that could happen is you could buy maybe a $200,000 home.
Right.
Never dream small, meaning I'm just going to buy like a little condo. Back in the days, there was like $120,000, because the worst that could happen is you reach the goal and then you think, I'm okay now. You stop dreaming. You stop reaching for more.
Right.
You start settling. I set myself with drastic, crazy goals always. So I had sort of reasonable goals. And as I started gaining experience and making a ton of mistakes and learning from those mistakes and having more confidence and becoming better, my goals started getting bigger and started getting ridiculous, to a point where, like, seriously, like, I'm going to buy a house that I don't even make that much, even close to that, to afford it. And back in the days, it was like, it's called stated income. Anyone could buy a house.
Right.
And I was one of them. I bought a $600 and some thousand home. I was not making not even $100,000 a year. And then I got it, and I remember, how am I going to pay for this now? Part of my strategic goals in terms of pushing myself, I've always been a person, I was a risk taker. I've always been a risk taker. And my thing was, if I have the debt, my parents taught me, if you have a debt, you need to pay it no matter what. Because I was in such a large debt, for me, $610,000 was a lot of money back then. So I was like, I have the debt, I have the mortgage payment, and I have no money. My first home was the reason I became successful. And it was because of debt. So I remember it was an empty 2-story home. It was an empty home. I had nothing other than my clothes. I took my clothes from my parents' house. I took my clothes. I didn't even have furniture.
You're like, I got a house, though.
I got a house, my own house. The American dream. I'm in debt. I owe all of it, but I have a house.
Got a house, people.
But that's where my business really took off, because I was so afraid to lose that house that I created a work habit, disciplines. I started implementing the 80-20 rule. I started focusing on more business and less personal. And I was working. So a lot of people, some of my friends, it's because you're so lucky. You have success because you're lucky.
Wow.
When I got the house, now this is going to sound crazy, and I guarantee you, most people will not do what I did. I was working 7 days a week, 361 or 2 days a year, between 16 to 20 hours a day, because I was afraid to lose the house. And guess what? That year, my income went up by like $150,000. That year. And then I'm like, oh, I like this. So then I set up another ridiculous goal, and then another one. And then I was like, I need an office, because, okay, I bought a house and I was working from home.
Okay.
I mean, that's still not a tax professional working from home. Nowadays, it's normal, but back in the days, it wasn't. So I've always set crazy goals, always. And that kept me going forward, kept me going forward. I remember I had an office in Covina. It was like a 1,300 square foot office. And I was like, I made it. I have an office. I remember it was 3,000 something a month. And I was like, now I have to work extra hard to pay the house and pay an office. I'm like, it's okay. If I was able to grow 100,000, I could do 200,000. Then I could do 300. I could do $500,000. The sky's the limit. Then the confidence kicked in. Then more education kicked in. Then I started going to more, I started hiring coaches. Then everything started sort of like perfectly aligning to make sure that I reached those goals. Then I went, you know what? I'm going to buy a commercial property. I'm going to put my practice in a 10,000 square foot office building. And then I had another crazy goal, buy an office building. Why not? And then I started work. I mean, I was working that many hours, 7 days a week. I remember I only took off Christmas, New Year's, and Thanksgiving. I never even took out my kids' birthdays, my birthday. I was working nonstop. And this wasn't for a year or 2 years or 5 years or 7 years. It was like 9 or 10 years. I don't remember exactly, but it was like around 10 years straight. No crazy person out there will work that much. Then as I was working, hustling, I was focused, all that, and I started creating crazier goals that I knew I couldn't accomplish. But then I moved into this building, and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? How am I going to pay this off? I started working smarter, not harder. So I started focusing on corporations, focusing on tax resolution work, which brings in more revenue. And then that's when my business plan sort of shifted, and I started working with, more successful business owners. I started charging a little bit more because I was better. And then that's when you know your self-worth, because before I was charging pennies for my services.
Right.
Now I know how to charge because I know my worth and I know how good I am. And then things just, after that, you become unstoppable. I mean, it's just crazy.
It all comes down to confidence building, and you're building yourself constantly over the years, and that is profound. I love that. I'm going to ask you to share with the audience, because you and I talked about this, and I think it's so important because I know it happens a lot around, especially the Latino culture, is how to give yourself permission to dream big.
It took years to give myself that permission. And something that sort of marked me was when I was graduating from, I went to Lincoln High School, born and raised in Lincoln Heights.
I think my parents went there.
And yeah, I went to Lincoln High School. I graduated in 89 from Lincoln High School. So in 89, part of my buddies, we had, we're all graduating. So they voted, who is the least likely to succeed? And that was yours truly.
Wow,
Yeah.
really?
And let me tell you, then it was a joke, and I laughed, and I was like, yeah, right. Because I was a class clown. I wasn't very smart when I was in high school.
Class
I didn't.
clown.
I was always being a class clown. I was always trying to be funny. I was always trying to fit in. I was still broke, so my self-esteem was pretty low. So I used humor to try to cover the fact that I was taking the RTD, which was, the bus back there. I had a bus pass, and I still couldn't eat. I had to eat the school lunch because I didn't have money to eat outside.
Hey, we got the low income tickets that we would
free
tear
lunch.
off. Free lunch. We got free lunch.
I got free lunch too.
It's okay. My mom still says we weren't low class, but it's all good.
When you grow up thinking that it's not for you, you don't give yourself that permission to just really let go.
Right.
Because you still have those fears, those insecurities, like you're not good enough, you're never going to make it. Like, how do you dare break the tradition that your parents were broke, their grandparents were broke, their parents were broke? Like, it's a tradition. Just don't mess up this tradition.
We're all going to be broke together.
Yeah, that's part of the tradition, right? So I'm like, how dare you get out of this tradition? As you get older and you mature, you still have those thoughts, and those thoughts turn into fears, and those fears turn into limitations, and those limitations make you just be that person.
Yes.
And you limit yourself, and you don't dare to go beyond the basics because you feel like you're not worthy. Like you can't, like you're not good enough. When I hit rock bottom was when I remember I was already doing presentations for business owners. I was trying to build my business, and I remember there's always haters. There's always going to be haters, especially when they see that you're moving forward. There's always going to be people that want to push you back. So I remember I was doing a presentation. I never talked about money because I was broke, but I did talk about taxes and strategies and accounting and so forth. And I remember someone asked the person, like someone like yourself who invited me as a guest speaker, said, if he's that good, what does he have? Like, basically, what's his net worth? What is his assets?
Right.
I was broke. I remember just thinking, wow, like, this is sad. I remember struggling to buy food because as an auditor, I got paid once a month. And I was maxed out on my credit cards. I couldn't eat. And yet I was driving around in a sports car, fancy clothes, going out. And to everyone, I was successful. But deep down inside, I knew that I was broke. So once you finally reach a stage when you're comfortable with yourself, you made plenty of mistakes and you're ready to move forward, I don't know, I believe it's God. God tells you you're ready.
Okay.
And you give yourself that permission to be great.
Oh.
And you give yourself that permission to just move forward and don't let anyone, and well, first of all, one of the requirements is you have to have a gallon of Vaseline and just drench yourself in Vaseline, because the more success you have, more haters come out. And you need to have that Vaseline so they could just slide off. But when you connect with God, when you connect with who you really are and what you were meant to accomplish, and you find your purpose in life. Now, let me tell you what my purpose is. I struggled to find a purpose. I thought it was to make money.
Right.
And then you make money, you're not happy. So my purpose, and this is why I became a tax accountant, is to help business owners, to have someone be there for them when they're starting their business or when they're growing their business. Because I don't only do tax work. I do all kinds of work. I also work with their finances. I work with strategic strategies to make their business grow. And so I do a lot more than just taxes.
Right.
And I did that because I became a tax accountant. And I don't know if we have time, but I became a tax accountant because my dad's swap meet business got audited by the IRS. And the IRS agent was, I would have to say, a racist.
Okay.
Because my dad didn't speak English. I was in my first year of college. I had no idea what taxes were and what accounting was and receipts. And a typical business owner went in with a shoebox of receipts, not organized, and the IRS just nailed us. Opened 3 years of audits, treated us like trash, made him pay an amount of money that he wasn't able to pay in taxes. And I remember going to my counselor and say, what do I have to do to help my dad? You have to be a tax accountant and emphasize in taxation and auditing and accounting, which is what I did. So after working and realizing that money doesn't make you happy, then I realized, well, what's my purpose? So my real purpose is to help Latinos, because that's who I usually focus on, is working with Latinos, because they need a lot more help, because I'm thinking of my dad. Help them so what my dad went through, they never go through. Guide them, help them become successful, help them sleep well at night knowing that everything is well. And then second is helping those in need. I'm big in doing work to help children. So that's why one of my pins is with Rotary. I'm a Rotarian. I've been doing that for years. So I love giving back to a community. I was blessed by God, and now I think it's my responsibility to bless those that are in need as well. Because I remember I was one of those kids selling oranges in the street. So when anyone sells oranges or flowers or whatever, I'm there buying.
Wow, that was amazing, Tony. I mean, there's so much. First of all, I already knew Tony and I could talk and talk and talk and go on for hours and hours. Like, we just didn't prepare that. But I really wanted to quickly have you share all about One Tax Pro. You guys saw a little bit about who he is and what he does, but just quickly share with the audience, like, who you're helping.
The majority of our clients are business owners.
Okay.
I'll probably say 98% are all business owners, and then of that, the majority are Latinos. And they're nationwide. It's not just here in Covina or here in California. They're nationwide.
Right.
And that's who our focus is really focusing on helping them, especially when they're new. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of services like, formation of LLCs or corporations, tax strategies, business and personal tax returns. So we have a team of lawyers, financial advisors, insurance agents that work with the company to make sure that they're properly protected, pay the least amount of taxes possible, and avoid, red flags and stuff like that. But mostly strategic strategies that are going to help you pay less in taxes, but structure yourself and protect yourself.
And you do
Safeguard your
IRS
assets.
audits, right?
Oh yeah, that's my specialty actually.
Oh,
Tax resolution work.
IRS
Yeah,
audits,
yeah.
people. So
That's my specialty. I
I'm
would have
telling
to say.
you, when he says he's a good accountant, no, he is a great accountant. So that is it for our show, but I'm telling you, we could have talked forever. I want you all to ask your questions. If you're following along with us, what resonated with you? How inspired were you? I mean, you inspire me all the time. And so I thank you for sharing your experience, what you went through. I mean, it's so similar. I mean, I kid you not. I went through the same path you did. Is there one thing you want to share with the audience, a quote that you absolutely love? Share with the audience now.
There's a lot of stuff that I want to share, but the main one that at least was difficult for me to try to sort of snap out was fear. Don't let fear paralyze you. Know that you're meant for greatness. And have the discipline, have the goals, have the mentors, and there's no way that you could be stopped. One of the things that I do is I do free consultations for business owners. And I do that for the purpose of guiding them to make the right decisions. And sometimes I help them make the decisions that are moving forward, which is also important because there's financial considerations. But I think just don't be afraid of mistakes. Have crazy goals, because those work for me sometimes, and have great mentors. Francine is a great mentor as well. She's a coach, and I admire her work, and she's really good too. So I have to admit, you're amazing.
He's really good. I love it. I didn't pay him to say that, I promise. Thank you guys so much for joining. I appreciate all of you here. And just know, remember, everybody we talk about, who we bring in as guests, and what I share is because we truly know that you are meant for more. So have an awesome day.